Good. Fine. In our today's class, we'll discuss about delegates. So before understanding what is a delegate, let's try to do a quick recap of what we have understood earlier, few topics which we have understood earlier, and where the first one being your method or function. So what is a method or a function? A method or a function is a series of statements which are executed sequentially under a single name, right? And the second keyword which we should be understanding before getting into the delegates is pointer. So what is a pointer? We understood that when we are dealing with reference types, so each reference type which is saved on your heap will be having something called as pointer attached to it, and that pointer holds the address of your reference type. Making sense? Yes or no? Do we remember? Good. Good. So that being said, your pointer which we have discussed earlier, so it is about the reference types. So if we remember our one of our earlier classes when we were discussing the differences between your reference types and your value types, we understood that primarily there are 4 or 5 types which can be called as reference types. And first one is your class, second one is your object, third one is your delegate, fourth one is your enum, right? Good. So here delegate is a reference type is a delegate. No, delegate is a reference type. That's how you should put it. Reference type is not a delegate. Delegate is a reference type. Making sense, Vishwa? Did you understand? There are multiple other types which can be called as reference types. Good. So that being said, let me quickly define what is a delegate. So a delegate is a type safe function pointer. What is that? It's a type safe function pointer. What does that mean? What does function pointer means? Function pointer means that a pointer holds the reference or address of something, right? And a function pointer holds the reference or the address of a function, right? Good. So what is the purpose of holding the reference of a function separately in some other type of data or some other data type? Usually, you will be coming across scenarios in your real time where you want to execute the function indirectly instead of calling it directly, right? There are multiple applications of this, like your events, like your anonymous methods, like your lambda expressions, which are the future concepts of your delegate. And all the advanced concepts, they are written on top of your delegate, or they are designed on top of your delegate, and delegate acts as the basic or fundamental for all the advanced topics which we have discussed, or which we have listed now. So that being said, you should understand that there are different situations in real time which would require a function or a method to be called indirectly, right? So how will you call a method indirectly? Through your delegate. How will you do that? Because delegate holds the reference to a function. So you can call the function through this reference indirectly. Making sense? Good. Now, coming back to the definition of your delegate again, we understood that delegate is a type safe function pointer, right? So what does type safe means? What does type safety means? We have understood what is type safety earlier. What is type safe? Type safe means that when we are performing some conversions or marshalling operators or some other operations on top of two different operands of which might be of any type, you should always ensure that type safety is being maintained. What does type safety means? That you are performing valid operations based on the type of both the operands. For example, if there is a string a data type, you can't use it for adding it to a number, right? Which doesn't make sense. And you can't convert the string into some other type. Making sense? So here, when we are performing some operation, you should be taking care of the type safety. So that being said, here type safety, we call it as a type safe function pointer, because when you are trying to execute the function indirectly, or when you are trying to hold the reference of a function through the delegate, you will be ensuring that the type of the definition of your method or function is same as the definition of your delegate. So the definition of the function should be matching the definition of your delegate. Fine. Then only you can hold the reference of that particular function through your delegate. Making sense? So that's the reason why we call it a type safe function pointer, right? When somebody asks you, this is a very good or very important interview question, and if somebody asks you what is a delegate, you should tell that a delegate is a type safe function pointer. Why do you call it a type safe function pointer? Because it can implement, or it can hold the reference to a function whose definition or signature is matching the delegate. Otherwise, it can't implement it, or it can't hold the reference of that particular function, right? Making sense? Is it clear till this point? Now, now extending it further, I have a question for you. So if there are two different functions with the same signature as your delegate, or if there are two different functions whose signatures match the delegate signature, then can your can your fine. So can your delegate implement both the functions, or can it contain reference to both the functions? Can it happen that way? Yes or no? Or can it hold only reference to one function? What's your say? Make a wild guess. It's fine even if it is wrong. Guys, sorry. I have muted myself. I don't know how it got muted, and I was unable to unmute it. Okay, so I have to reset it again. One second. One second. I think there is a issue. One second, please. Okay, sorry guys, I got some call. Okay, so my question was whether you can hold references to more than one function using a delegate or not. Okay, my answer is yes, you can hold a reference to more than one function given the condition that all the methods which are held by your delegate are matching the signature. Making sense? And correct. And that being said, when your delegate is holding reference to more than one function, then that delegate is called as multicast delegate. Fine? That is called as multicast delegate. Making sense? Good. So now let's try to create a delegate and let's try to understand how your delegate works. And in the beginning of our session, when we were discussing object-oriented programming, we understood that a class can also be called as type, and there are multiple other types. And later we discussed about something called as your interface, right? Now the third one called as delegate is also a type, is also a type in itself. Good. Hope you are able to see the screen. Good. Now, when we say that a delegate is a type, you should understand that int del of a int b. Fine. This is your delegate. So you'll create your delegate using the keyword called as delegate, right? And if you see, the signature of your delegate looks similar to the signature of your method. So it has a return type and it has parameters as well, right? Making sense? Good. So if you have observed clearly, the delegate is defined outside the definition of your class. So only two access modifiers, public and internal, are allowed before delegate. I did not get you. You can unmute yourself and start asking the question. So no problem. Hold with this question. Hold with this question. We'll discuss it a bit later. Okay. So that being said, if you observe, okay, if I create a variable, okay, before outside the definition of my class, int a, fine. So do you see that it's throwing a error? What does that mean? That means you cannot define a variable outside the types definition. Okay, so it should be always defined inside the types definition. Okay, whether it is class or interface or whatever it is. Making sense? However, when we are talking about our delegate, a delegate can be defined uh, outside the definition of a type as well, because it's a type by itself. Fine. So that being said, I'm looking for a document. Okay, that's fine. So this is your delegate. Now let's try to create a function. Public int uh, public int add of int a comma int b shit return a plus b. is the definition or signature of this particular function called as add, is it matching the signature of your delegate? Good. Now inside my main, what I'll do, okay, so when we are defining it, when you are creating an object of a delegate using the new keyword, you see that inside the parenthesis it is expecting something which returns a int and which accepts two integers, right? So what does that mean? It is expecting a method. Making sense? Then one second. Okay, good. So this should be static actually. Fine. Now let me execute this method. Let me execute this method called as add indirectly using the delegate. Console dot write line of sum of 6 and 7 is 0, comma k del of 6 comma 7. Fine. I am not calling the method, okay, but I am passing the parameters to the delegate and triggering the delegate, which will indirectly call the method because it has the reference to that method. Making sense? Yes or no? Now if I execute it, it should say 13. Fine. Is it correct? Now, fine. So this is about your delegate. Now let me create one other method with similar signature, multiply. And what I'll do, I'll create one other delegate called as delegate2, and I'll hold the reference of multiply. Fine. And what I'll do, I'll create a default delegate, math delegate del. Okay, I'll just call it del, and I'll use the mathematical functions like del equal to del1 plus del2. Fine. So here your del1 holds reference to the add method and del2 holds the reference to your multiply method. Fine? Making sense? And del holds the reference to both of them. Okay, and what I'll do just to show you that both the methods are getting called product of del of 6 comma 7. Fine. I am calling this delegate, and this delegate holds the references to both the functions because we have added references of both of it to this delegate. Okay, now both the functions should get executed. One second, what's happening? Okay, good. What I'll do, here what I'll do, fine. One second, let me it's getting closed because the return is being called first, so it will not call the console.writeline methods. Right. Are you able to see that? So first it calls both of them. Let me make this void. Okay, and void and void. Okay. Let me run. Fine. Is it calling both the methods? So this means one delegate can hold the reference to more than one function, right? So when a delegate is holding more reference to more than one function, then what is it called as? It's called as multicast delegate. Making sense? What is that? I did not get you. Somebody seems to have a question. What is del doing here? Good. So let me explain this code again. Okay. Here, think that your add is located at 1008 location. So del1 will hold reference to this add through the address called as 1008. Okay. Will the output be 61? No. So what will happen? Let me tell you. Okay, and del2 holds the reference to multiply. Okay, and del holds reference to both of them, right? Now when you execute del with these parameters, first it will execute add with these parameters, and after that it will execute the multiply with these parameters. So what will happen? It should say that sum of 6 and 7 is 13 here, and after that it will execute this method, and it will say that product of them is 6 sevens are 42, I think. Okay, got it, Vishwa? Is it making sense? Here you are not worrying about the operands which are being passed or parameters which are being passed, but you will trigger both the functions, or how many other functions are being held by this delegate. It will trigger all of them. Making sense? Good. That's the reason why it is called as multicast delegate, and conceptually it's a bit important. That being said, now you should understand some other keyword or word associated with your C#, which is very much related to your delegate called as event. Can you tell me what is a event? Can you tell me what is a event? No idea? Good. So a event can be two things actually. A event can be a user action or a system notification. Fine. It is a user action or a system notification which can be handled. Okay. For example, think that you have a button on your web page, and on click of the button you should validate whether the user ID and password given in the web form are correct or not, and you should redirect it to the home page. Fine. Then this should happen, this validation or this check should happen on click of the button, right? So here on click is a event, and it would be handled through a method which will make the validation check and redirect you to some other page. And this event and this method are wired using a delegate internally. Making sense? Understanding or not? Did we understand what is a event? Why are we calling it as a user action or a system notification? Can we have an example for system notification? Think that when your page is getting loaded, okay, when your web form is getting loaded, there will be multiple events associated with your page, okay, and we will discuss that later. However, just for your understanding of the system notification, when the page is about to get loaded, then you'll have something called as preload event, and when the page is getting loaded, you have some other event called as load event, you have render event, you have some other event like your unload event. Okay, there are multiple events associated with the life cycle of your page. Okay, these are not triggered by some end user, right? So they are not user actions, but they are system notifications, right? And there are the application level events which are handled inside your global.asix file. Okay, we'll discuss all of them later. Don't get confused with the concepts, but just for your understanding, if there is some logic which needs to be executed when your application is about to get started, then you will write it in the app start event handler. Okay, and when you are about to close the application, or when your application is about to get closed, then you have some other event associated with that called as app end event, right? So in that way, based on system notifications, also events can be triggered, and every event can be handled through a method, and the method and the event are related or tagged or wired using a delegate internally. Making sense? An event is a application of your delegate. Fine, understood? Just give me a second, please. Fine, sorry guys. Mm, fine. So that's about your event. The another application associated with your delegate is something called as a anonymous method, and your anonymous method has taken a very lengthy route, and even till today the delegates is first introduced in .NET 2.0, okay, which should be in 2005. However, there are very recent concepts like your entity framework or LinkU or any other advanced concepts related to object relational mapping. All of them, they are dependent on the delegates. Making sense? And that's the reason why, even though it is a fundamental concept, and even though you might not get a chance to use delegates in reality lot of times, but you are one second, you are entitled to learn it, because there are multiple other topics which we will be discussing in the future, which are dependent on your delegate. Fine. So let's start with the workflow, and let's try to understand the immediate or advanced concepts associated with your delegate called as anonymous method. Fine. Making sense? What is a anonymous method? What is a method, guys? A method is a user action. Is it a user action? No. So a method is a series of statements which are executed sequentially under a single name, right? So here a method has a name and signature associated with it. However, when we are calling it as anonymous method, you should understand that method will not have any name associated with it. Fine? Good. Then how can a method exist without a name, or how can you call it without a name? You can call a method without a name by passing on the total code to a delegate directly, right? And you can execute the code directly using your delegate. Then if you are not giving the method a name, and if you are executing the code directly through a delegate, then that method without a name is called as a anonymous method. Making sense? Good. Second. Delegate of ye comma ye comma int b int a comma int b. Fine. Let me execute it. Good. So let me explain this code now. What did I do here? Here, if you have looked at this code is exactly same to your methods code, right? So it is accepting two parameters. This is also accepting two parameters, and it has some statements inside the body, and this also has some statements inside the body, right? The same statements, in fact, right? However, only difference is that you are not having, or you are not giving a name associated with this code, right? Code is exactly same, but it doesn't have a name, right? Yes or no? Are you understanding or not? So this is exactly or 100% similar to this function. However, it doesn't have a name associated with it. How did the product is the same? This thing product, we called it directly. Okay, forget about product then. Okay. I'll say 1. Okay, I don't have product here and we are not worried about multiply. Okay, fine, we are just worried about the sum. And here I have replaced the add method with a anonymous code which is almost similar to the code associated with your add method, but it doesn't have the name associated with your add. Right? Making sense? Good. Now if I execute it, it results in the same output, right? Which means it is 100%, this code is 100% same as your add function, but it doesn't have a name associated with it, and that's the reason why this is called as your anonymous method. Fine? Is it making sense? Is it clear or not? Good. So we understood what is a delegate, what is a multicast delegate, and what is anonymous method. Okay, now let's get into some other scenario, or the next concept called as generics. So what is generics? I am creating a new class called as generics. Let me write some code and explain generics using that code. Okay, so I have a very basic requirement, very simple requirement, which says create a method which prints whatever you pass to it. Okay, it's a void method and it's called as print, and I have int a, and I'm writing console dot write line of comma a. Here I'll write the input provided is 0, comma a. Making sense? So now let me execute this method here. How will I execute it? I'll create a generics obj equal to new generics, and I'll call the method obj dot print. Okay, what does this do? It accepts some number and it will print it. Fine. Very simple requirement. Fine. Is it working fine? Now tomorrow they have enhanced the requirement and asked me to start printing names. Fine. So dot print of Anil. Fine. So if I run this, will it work? Will it work? No, it's throwing error. Why so? Because this print function accepts a int type parameter, right? So what you should do? Arey Baba, you know the concept, okay, but hold the curiosity for some time, okay, because the other people don't know. Okay, now I'll have to change it to string, right? I'm overloading it literally. What is overloading? What is overloading? Sai Krishna, what is overloading? Sai Krishna, can you hear me? Do you know what is overloading? trying to remember. Prakriti, what is overloading? Prakriti, what is overloading? Say yes if you can recollect, say no if you can't remember. But don't sit idle. Create more than one name. I did not get you. Method, one method with different signature but same name. Vishwa, what is overloading? Awesome. Creating more than one method with a same name but different signature. Okay. So guys, I think no one of you are revising what we have discussed earlier. So let's do it this way. After tomorrow's session, last 5 minutes of your tomorrow's session, you'll have an assessment. Okay. And I'll share the assessment results with your consultancies. Okay. Whoever is your manager at your consultancy, they'll get the result. Okay. And also be assured that the attendance is being shared on daily basis. Okay. Fine. So please be informed that your attendance and assessment results, everything will be shared with your companies. Okay, so take the training very seriously. Okay, and I understand, Sai Krishna, you are not getting time, but I got responses from Prakriti and I got responses from Vishwa. Vishwa, did you send the responses for the questions which I have given you? I remember you sent it. Good. So that being said, so take assessments, attendance, everything seriously, guys, because I have shared a Google Doc with your company. Okay, and most of the times I heard from uh, his name is Prakash at your company, Sai Krishna. He has been monitoring your attendance, and Vishwa at your company's front, a person by name Mahesh is monitoring. Okay, so please try to join class regularly on time, and even if you are joining late also, it's being mentioned in the attendance. And revision is very important again. Okay, so because .NET is not a small course, it requires at least 30 to 40 hours to complete the total course. That being said, if you don't revise things, the first topic which we have discussed will be out of your mind by the last class. Okay, so that's the reason why I keep giving you assignments. So tomorrow you have a test on object oriented programming, and recordings has been shared with you already, and I expect 100% attendance, and results will be shared, and attendance will be shared with your companies again. Okay, so please take things seriously. I don't require vague answers. Okay, answer should be very precise. Okay, and that too object oriented programming, man, come on. As I said, like even if you're 20 years experienced developer also, the first question you'll be getting in any interview will be on object oriented programming. Fine. So take it seriously. I don't want to demotivate you, but still, if you are not putting in efforts, it's mere waste joining the training. Okay, and for that matter, any course you join, if you want to be in IT, take things seriously. Okay, analytical ability and the approach to the coding, approach to a problem, approach to a program will not be built in one day. Okay, if you don't practice, it takes years. Okay, decide by yourself whether you will be struggling or you will be putting in efforts before your training, or whether you will be taking the 100% efforts after getting the job. Okay, it's totally up to you. So here, coming back to the concept, we have created one more method with a different signature to avoid the dependency on the type being passed to this method, right? So at essence, both the functions, they are doing the same thing, but we have created two different functions to avoid the dependency on the type being passed to it, right? Making sense? So this is a very simple example associated with the dependency on the type. However, in reality, there might be scenarios where you will run across complex situations which tie up your code and which make your code completely coupled to a particular type. Okay, so for making your code independent of a type being passed to it, you should use something called as generics. Fine? Making sense? Good. So what is generics, guys? So let me use generics here. This is called as, this T here is called as generic parameter or generic attribute, and this is representing the type of your class, or it says that, sorry, the type being passed to your class, and this is called as generic type again. Okay, so for example, now what we'll do, we can remove this second function and you can say that this is of generic type. Fine. And this generic type, the type of the type being passed to your class would be decided only during your runtime or declaration of your object. So if I say here that this is a int type of generic class, then int type would be assumed by your a. Okay, and if I say that this is a string type of generic class, string type would be assumed by the a there. Fine. T would be referring to int in your first case and string in your second case. Fine. Now if I execute this code, it will print both of them. Fine. However, we are not using two different methods, but we are still using only one method. But we have reduced the dependency on the type being passed to your class using the generics. Understood? Making sense? So what is the purpose of generics? Generics is used to reduce the dependency on a particular type being passed to a class. Fine? And thus making your code type independent or loosely coupled to a type. Understood? There are many applications, several applications which were created on top of your generics, like we have generic collections, generic lists, and functions which are tied to generic functions, so tied to generic collections. So all of them, they are constructed on top of your generics. That's the reason why understanding generics is important again. Fine? Making sense? So from our tomorrow's class onwards, we'll start understanding the advanced concepts like your lambda expressions, link queue, generic collections, etc., etc. Fine, extended methods, partial classes, whatnot. So we'll understand all the advanced concepts which were created after 2008. Making sense? Good. So be prepared for the assessment tomorrow. Tomorrow you have a assessment on object-oriented programming, and all the sessions recorded were placed in your Google Drive. So go through all of them. It will not take more than 3 hours or 4 hours. So please go through all of them, practice it, and you'll have a 5 minutes or 10 minutes assessment tomorrow after your class. Fine? And attendance is mandatory. Okay. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for joining. Let's meet tomorrow at the same time again. Thank you. Bye.